Education. And we're so happy to have you here with us today. This is the second in a series of Q&A sessions around AI. We know that the conversation around AI is ongoing, evolving, and complicated. And we wanted to bring you some voices of folks in the field who are doing really great work. And with the big caveat that we're all learning, we're all evolving, we're all growing. Rob, Laura, Leah, and Danielle, who you'll hear from today, are really, really great thinkers on this, but they don't have all the answers. What they have is their experience. And so we're lucky to be able to hear from them today. So a little bit of housekeeping before we dive in. And to do that housekeeping, I'd like to introduce Rob McDonald. He is one of our key partners here at Trey Education and a lead on some of our AI work. Rob.
Thanks. So I'm excited to be moderating this panel discussion. Thank you to those of you who have already submitted lots of questions. We've used those to build the agenda for today. We've got some questions that fall into the 5 categories that you see listed up there. And considering that our panelists have experience with school leadership, they are well suited to address those questions for you. We have got things set up for spotlighting on the recording, but you're welcome to pin the speakers if you would like. If everything is behaving correctly, then people other than Mira, me, and the panelists are muted. We'll stick with that approach just to save everybody from some background noise. You are welcome to use the chat. Whether you want to share some resources or some responses to what you're hearing, we'll be keeping an eye on that back channel. And like Mira said, everyone who's registered, whether you're here right now or not, will get a copy of the recording at the end. So with that, I would love to have our 3 panelists today introduce themselves. Danielle, do you want to start us off?
Absolutely, happy to. Thanks for having me. I'm Danielle Pasno. I'm one of our assistant heads of school and director of teaching and learning at the Browning School. We're a K through 12 boys' school in New York City. This is my 8th year there, and it's a fantastic place with the mission I really believe in. And I'm excited to talk to you about the AI journey that we've been on the last 3 years.
Thanks so much. And Laura, how about you?
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for having me. I'm the head of upper school at Moses Brown School in Providence, Rhode Island. We are a Quaker day school, nursery through 12th grade, and about 750 students with 400 in the upper school. And I'll just say briefly as context, I think it might be helpful to know that as a Quaker school, we really use consensus decision making, and so a lot of ground up decision building and consensus building.
Nice. And Leah.
Hi, everyone. I see some familiar faces as well. I am currently the head of middle school at the Mount Vernon School. We are a school that has 3 organizational structures. So we have what we call the day school, we have Mount Vernon Ventures, and we have Mount Vernon School Online, our global campus. So we have about 1,250 students that we service. And I'm excited. I love the mission of our school. We are leaning very heavily, not just into AI, but also into futures thinking. And I'm excited to be here to talk to you all today.
Thanks. I'll say it again multiple times, I'm sure, but thanks to all 3 panelists. So excited to be talking with you today. We'll start off with this category of leadership. So one of the questions is about what has AI direction setting, adoption, rollout, integration, all of those sort of phases? What does that look like at your school? Danielle, would you be willing to dive into that one first?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks so much. Yeah, like I said, at Browning, we've been kind of taking a look at generative AI since, I guess, November 2022, when ChatGPT was launched. And I wanted to ignore it at first. I think I tried ChatGPT the first time, I think the day after it was released, and I asked it to write a poem about Browning. And it gave me a poem about the poet, Browning the poet. And then I said, no, the school in New York City, and it wrote a poem but didn't mention boys in it at all, which is funny because we're a boys' school. So I thought, oh, I'm not going to have to worry about this. And then it was very clear that I was wrong, that it was going to absolutely change the way that we thought about our teaching and learning program. So because I think I had such a fear response to it at first, I decided that the best way to work with our faculty on it was to actually embrace optimism in terms of AI in education, because I worried that if our that our response was either cynicism or fear, that we wouldn't be able to get as far as we needed. And I credit Sal Khan's kind of video TED Talk on that really helped me kind of switch my thinking to be more optimistic about what we might be able to do as good actors with AI. So again, that was the first thing we did as a faculty, is we looked at what is positive about this experience and how can this put joy into our teaching. And that was literally how we framed it. How could this bring joy to the teaching that we're doing in a time where teaching has dramatically changed over the last 2 decades. And then our next move was to start doing focus groups with students, because we assumed that they would be faster adopters of AI than we were. So in the spring of 2023, that's what we moved to, is how can we speak to our students about their experience with AI. And those were just pure gold, those focus groups, just what we were able to learn from students about ethics and how they viewed it, whether or not they saw it as a learning tool or a cheating tool, whether or not they saw a bright line between those two. And that really shaped our response to it. But because we felt like the student response at Browning after those focus groups gave us hope that they actually could see very clearly the positive role AI could play in their learning, and could articulate where they saw the line between cheating and learning. That helped our faculty feel, again, optimistic about what we could do with it. So at that point, we jumped into just looking at 2 ways we could use AI. One, how we could be efficient with the use of it, and then more efficient with the use of it, and then how could we deepen learning. So those were kind of the 2 different avenues we took a look at, and we had departments create lists of how they could deepen learning with it. Again, this was pretty early, but how they could imagine themselves deepening learning, and then how they could imagine themselves being more efficient as teachers with it. So that led us to looking at feedback. And so we started looking at platforms that would provide faster forms of feedback than we're often able to give as teachers. So that led us to exploring Magic School and Flint. I think these are platforms that people at this point are probably pretty familiar with. So year 2 of learning was kind of just playing with platforms, no mandates. We still have no mandates around AI, and just trying to be really playful with it, while also establishing the boundaries we needed to have with it, such as even in a protected subscription-based platform that we're paying for, we're still not uploading student information. We're still really protecting data and things like that. And our use of AI platforms was really high that second year. Ended up being something a lot of teachers felt good about. We had a summer learning cohort that folks got paid to play basically with it and create opportunities. And then actually this year 3, we've actually seen our use of AI slow. And one of the reasons for that is because we've been really wondering about the impact of, at a time where for our boys in particular, we're looking at studentship and the skills of studentship. That's something that's really important to our school. How do we teach the skills of executive functioning, studentship, the ability to create a plan, manage your plan, reflect on the plan, and reach a satisfactory endpoint. And so we've been pulling back on screen use in general in order to manage the studentship program we have. So it's been this kind of question of how do we pull back on screens while simultaneously using AI? And that's the question we're living with right now. We're doing a screen audit, and And we have our entire ninth grade using Write on tablets rather than laptops, and just trying to experiment with what does it look like to pull laptops out of the classroom and yet still have AI experiences for students. So it's definitely been a process of growth and experimentation. But I think that the thing that I would do all over again, if we had to do this again, was lean into how teachers could be good actors when it came to AI, and that we could teach our students to be the same.
Nice, thank you. And no, that you talk about bringing joy. I know that inevitably there are some people out there who are real skeptics and justifiably concerned about AI. We had some questions related to how school leaders can build buy-in among their team, especially when you've got some people who are skeptical. Leah, is that how would you feel about weighing in on that one?
Sure. I would say I can give examples of kind of how we approach this. And what we typically did was just start with the teachers who are already exploring with AI. That was a great way for them to model and have empathy for the teachers who weren't maybe not quite ready. So, and then if you have no one, let's say you have a division where there's no one who is exploring AI, start with the teachers who are open to trying new strategies or open to trying new ways of teaching. And then one of the things that we did, we offered kind of like, we do what's called RDI. So it's this opportunity for our teachers to just do research and to really dig into things that they're passionate about. And we offered a session, and we really started with connecting it to things that have already evolved for them. So for instance, we used the telephone and how it has really evolved. And the idea of it evolving is this idea of faster connection, right? So every time something evolves, it's just to connect faster. So really kind of tying into their previous knowledge of we've always evolved in how we've gone from, no email to email, or we've gone from, the phone attached to the wall to I can walk around with my phone. So really kind of introducing it from that standpoint really got people to open up. But I would say one of the biggest things is make people comfortable and be okay with a very slow rollout and not a rushed, everyone has to be all in and everyone has to implement this day one. I just think starting with teachers who are using AI, when you think about what teachers need to reduce their cognitive load, right? Because the idea of AI and thinking about AI can really increase stress and increase their cognitive load is how can you create immersive experiences for them? So how can I be able to pop my head next door to a teacher who's using it in their classroom and I can see what it looks like. I can see how students are responding. I can ask them how did they plan it, as opposed to if I sit in an AI workshop, I still have to do the cognitive load of like, how do I implement this? What does this look like? How will my kids respond? Where do I put it in my classroom? So really capitalizing and using the teachers who are already utilizing AI. And you would actually be really surprised how many teachers and how many people in your school are using AI, not just at school, but in their kind of daily life. Like they're using it all the time. And now you're kind of giving them the playground or the sandbox to do it at your school can be a really great way to get buy-in. And that's kind of how we started for a few years. We had teachers here and there using it, and they would say, hey, I'm doing this really, really awesome thing. We had teachers in our upper school that were using it in a way that was kind of defying our ideas. Like, no, they're like, we let our kids play in AI. We want them to play with it. We want them to explore it. And we really want to talk about what works and what doesn't work and why it's good and why it's not good. So kind of having that, those teachers already there working on that was a really great way. And I think a nice rollout for our faculty for buy-in as we were building kind of what our position was on AI.
Nice. And that what both of you have said so far brings up this issue of the appropriate pacing of the rollout. How do we make sure that how can school leaders make sure that people aren't feeling overwhelmed? How do you make sure that you don't just fall into sort of inertia? Laura wanted to make space to see if you wanted to add anything on that topic.
Yeah, I think our rollout has been probably more akin to the one Leah described, and sort of making space for people who were interested. And I think one of the things we did early on is really try to create space through some of the guidelines that we set out. We wrote a AI philosophy document relatively early on that really tried to create space for people to come to this question and to this new technology in ways they were comfortable with. I think as a Quaker school, one of the sticking points for us, for many people, was really around the ethics of AI and how that might sit, especially with our stewardship testimony. And so I think, at the same time, some people were really excited about it and all of the potential and really wanted to use it and were already using it. And so trying to really make sure this didn't become a sort of moral issue within the adults, especially in our community. And I think that helped make space for people to kind of take the transition at a pace that was comfortable for them. At least, I think what we've seen, and I think ours, I think we've come to this maybe a little bit later than at Danielle's school. I think we've seen sort of people open over time who at first I think really did have that fear response and are coming to be more open and curious. And we're sort of starting to lean into more training at this point. But I think it was sort of letting people adapt and adjust as needed before sort of diving in too heavily.
And you mentioned the statement of philosophy. I love that, and love the idea of that sort of document before you get into the weeds with policy decisions. But that opens up this whole topic of communication. We got some questions around where there sometimes can be alignment or misalignment between a school's public stance on AI and what's actually happening on campus on a daily basis. So wanted to make space for anyone to jump in there, and any thoughts about how to make sure that there is as much alignment as possible between your public stance and what's actually happening.
I can say just briefly, I think that a challenge for us is kind of knowing what we want to do and then figuring out how to do it, right? And so, we as a school have stated we really want to bring kids into ethical AI literacy. I think that's a great objective. And then thinking about how do we transform our curriculum in a timely way to do that well is a different question. And so as much as we've started to bring kids into that, we know we have a lot of work to do to really live into this idea that we would really like to to fill out more completely.
In true education form, we've made a lot of mistakes around this, which has taught us so much, and so that's been kind of a great thing. We have a board member who was at OpenAI, and it was such a relief when he told me. I was on the phone with him once, just talking through like, what should I have my eyes on that I don't right now, and he said to me, you and your students need to give yourselves grace when it comes to AI. This is new for everyone, and to expect you guys to have the answers you need and to make the right decisions at every turn is that's an impossible expectation for yourselves. And so hearing that was really helpful, because then at times we thought we were being really clear with students. Students would do something that felt like it crossed a line in our understanding of how they should use AI. And it was really important time for us to just say, hey, maybe no one was in the wrong here. Like maybe we're actually just learning how AI fits into our relationship with each other between teacher and student. And it allowed us to approach what could have been like pretty serious discipline issues with a kind of a softer touch, to say, we don't know what we don't know. And if we had known, we would have done something different, but we didn't. And so what can we learn from this? And what would help the students? What would help the teachers? And so having like that was such a gift we got from our board member, to kind of remind ourselves that it's okay to have grace with yourself in this kind of new world that we're in. The thing I'd say that we're trying to communicate most to our students and families is that in the age of AI, parts of our curriculum will change each year. Because they have to, because part of our curriculum does need to be responsive. But there are also parts of our curriculum that won't change because they're so central to the experience of being human, that it will never leave our curriculum. So storytelling, for instance, is a really big part of the Browning education. Is how can you, as a boys' school, as a young man, how can you learn to tell your story? that is just as true today as it was, in 2021 before we were looking at the Gen AI we have now. So that communication is what's been helpful, is to say that you can expect change in some ways and no change in other ways.
Mhm.
I would say very similarly to Danielle, there was a period of time where it was very messy, and you might hear teachers saying things like students are cheating or students are being dishonest because they're using AI. And we kind of spent a lot of time right there in making sure that that was the onus was on us to make sure it was very clear to students when they could and when they couldn't use AI. So I think that was kind of the very first thing we did. And then we basically communicated to our families that yes, there are places and spaces where our students will use AI. There are places and spaces where, due to their age, they may not be able to use certain AI. So we kind of did that work in a way that we have I guess you would call it a tech booklet that was shared with families that basically said in lower school, we approach technology in this way. In middle school, we approach it this way. It looks like this. And then in upper school, we approach it this way. And, most schools have some type of tech position just based on whether you have laptops or iPads or whatever your use of technology is, but we went ahead and added AI to that. And that idea is that we will be exposing students to AI. We do have a plan. We kind of have a leveled approach to what evaluating assignments looks like in AI. And that has helped teacher and student. And so our teachers can put that on their assignments. So students know that this is a partial AI. This is when you can use it. You're not allowed to use AI at all, or this is an open AI one because we're going to really be playing and learning about AI. So that has been really helpful, I think, in just level setting up front, and then letting families know that as things evolve, we're going to be evolving with it. So we can't always say to you, this is exactly how we're going to use it or exactly what it's going to look like, but do know that we are very aware and we do our research on what is happening so that way our students are prepared for whatever workforce they're going to be going into.
Yep. And as you're all talking about the communication piece, ethics is folded into that quite a bit. We've heard some things about ethical student use, but Laura, wondering if you could share a little bit about adult AI use. How do we make sure that that is really modeling the sort of integrity that we want in students too?
Yeah, we have we've had a couple committees working on AI over the past couple of years who've taken the lead on some of the adult facing work. So I think we have a couple of different things and sort of guidelines to support adults. One of them is just a guidance for employee use. And so really thinking about sort of data and outward facing, inward facing, some of that use. We also noted in our philosophy statement, really tried to offer clarity around the difference between student and adult work. So as we think about how adults might model for students, I think one of the things that was helpful to teachers was to really think through how, students' work is always around learning. And so AI should always be in service of deepening that learning or enhancing that learning. And for teachers, our work is not always about learning. Sometimes it's about producing, right? That's sort of separate from a learning task. And that might be a place where we're using AI on a task that actually a student might not be able to use it on a similar task. And to be able to understand the difference in sort of purpose of that work. And then we've also offered attribution guidelines to our teachers to really think through if you're using AI in student-facing work, right, where students might see sort of your output that you've created with AI. How do you talk about them? What are expectations about how you engage with students around your use? And how do you attribute it in a way that is both transparent but not disruptive and doesn't undermine learning? Because we also felt like if you footnote everything you get from AI, that could really be disruptive and actually undermine trust. But still wanting to be really transparent and in conversation with students about AI use.
Thanks. And we got a lot of questions related to data privacy. Leah, that feels like it's probably more in your territory. Can you share a little bit there?
Sure. I would say for us, we've really tried to do our research specifically around the age guidelines. So if you look at a lot of the different kind of AI tools out there, ChatGPT is a great example that it has an age requirement to use it. And so we follow that age requirement. So under the age of 13, we don't allow students to use ChatGPT. especially unsupervised. So it wouldn't be something we would allow a student to use unsupervised. And then we wouldn't have them log in. We wouldn't have them use their data. I think someone mentioned earlier that we don't have students upload their personal data. But what we have done is most embedded educational AI tutors and bots are built to not need student personal data to operate. And so what we've done is we have, at the beginning of the school year, we've shared, in the middle school specifically, we have shared resources with our teachers of approved AI. So they don't have to do that research. They don't have to decide, is this good for kids or not? We shared a list of them of these are approved kind of AI sites that you can use or tools that you can use. And then they know that if they come across something else that they want to use, it just has to be run by our ed tech specialist, who is the person who has kind of compiled those tools for our teachers. That has worked really well because, again, one of the things, I'm always trying to keep in the back of my mind is reducing that cognitive load when you're introducing new things for teachers. So that's been one of the things that we've done is we have said to them, you can explore as a teacher any AI you want, but the moment you want to introduce it to students, if it's not on our approved list, then we'll need to research it and look at it. And that's, a way to just always continue as a school to be vigilant in looking at the data, looking at the age requirement, and then looking at, do you have to upload student data? Is there a commitment to not needing to mine for data? Has been something that we've kind of kept front of mind.
Yeah, easy to get caught up in the enthusiasm of the moment and to gloss over some of the cautions that you're raising there. So I really respect that. I think we should pivot to meaningful learning. This is a big topic that came up, a million different questions, but the general theme that we're hearing a lot is people worried that AI is going to lead to less critical thinking. Students just offloading the mental work to machines. I wonder, I think, Danielle, in terms of trying to make a case and trying as a school leader to motivate students to use AI in maybe in a way that's not as easy, but that is better in the long run, that's going to serve them in the long run. Is that something you'd be willing to speak to?
Yeah, thanks. I like the question because I don't really know how to answer it. This is a question that I have. Like, how do you motivate people to take a harder path for a long-term gain? That's just, for me, just a perennial school question. It's what we're in the business of doing with students generally. And AI has just made it really kind of a active question for me. So as an educator, I really believe that if we model things for students over and over and over again, that it somehow works into their understanding of how the world works. And so when I think about motivation, even if I'm seeing students in that moment not choose the harder path or not make the decisions that sometimes we wish that they would make, I very much believe that if we keep guiding them towards a better path, that somehow it somehow gets in there and down the road does impact them. It's one of the reasons I loved being a middle school division head, is that I never had people come back and tell me like, oh, the middle school was my best years. And yet I really believe that the middle school years very much matter in someone's development and who they end up becoming. So something that we're trying with motivating students is saying, okay, let's just do thought experiments together. Let's say that you are in a crunch and you use AI to take this shortcut on this paper, or you use AI to create this for you instead of working with your group on it. And let's say another student doesn't do that. How do those two students look after a month? Like, do you think there'd be any difference in, between their learning? And I think students can, I mean, they'll respond, there'll be a difference, and what happens if you did that over a 4-year period? What would happen? And they can say it, then my thinking would still be at a 9th grade level. Like, it wouldn't be at a senior level. So I think having those conversations with students is one way to motivate them. But I think they have to happen over and over and over again in every single class. Like, it can't just be one person who's talking to them about what's the risk of the shortcut in this moment. I think it's just this constant message of hard, deliberate effort builds a life of meaning, builds a life of interest in your work. And then I also think it's our responsibility as educators to make shortcuts or even cheating, which I don't think those are the same things necessarily, but to make it hard for people to take those. And so that's been another thing that we've looked at. I think it is there's only so much willpower any of us have, as one of our middle school teachers will say. And so how can we make it hard for a student to cheat? How can we make it hard for them to take the shortcut? And so those are the types of conversations that we're having. What it means is that we've looked at shifting some papers to oral presentations. Like, that's one thing that we've talked about. How can we honor process over product? Like, what would it look like to give feedback on process but give no feedback on the final product? Things like that, in order to motivate the journey that the students are on. But I don't really have the answers to this one. It's just I love it as a question, though.
Yeah, and what you said about how we need to rethink the way that we're assessing students, not just because of AI, for lots of different reasons, I would say, but yeah, if that gets us unstuck on some of the outdated assessment techniques, that wouldn't be so bad. In terms of another piece that people are nervous about is, what if we've got students who are using these tools, but we've got a generation that just sees it as this magical black box and they don't understand what's actually going on. Leah, I know you've talked a little bit about AI fluency and how to help students understand what's really happening. Could you share a little there?
Yeah, I think, one of the things that I haven't said yet that I think is really important for us to consider is whatever system that your school has for teaching students new concepts is very similar to how you would introduce AI to them. So that way it's not foreign, it's not confusing, it's a new idea, but how you introduce it to look very similar to how you introduce new programs, new concepts. So one of the things that we have done is, again, our school culture is, in the context of our school, is about pushing student agency. So we spend a lot of time talking about, we are not here to tell you what to use, but how to use it. So we're going to be more prone to exposing them to it and letting them play with it and get messy. But again, we're exposing them to things that are age appropriate, that are data private, right? But we are allowing them to kind of play in it and expose them to it. And I would say we kind of say to our teachers, somewhere in your lesson, somewhere in what you're doing, allow them to just play and be exposed to it, right? So that could look like doing a complete AI lesson as opposed to only using AI for a little bit. So, we've kind of approached it with students to say, you've been using AI for a while. Some of our students use Grammarly, that is AI. That is a very specific way that AI is used. So basically, if you use Grammarly the right way, you put your original thoughts down, and then you have the assistive technology come in and to help you and support you. So we have kind of like a half brain, right? And then half of a brain is you used your brain, and the other half is you used AI. So we explain to our kids kind of the different scenarios of when and how to use AI, and just giving them the opportunity to actually really just play in it, kind of unrestricted, is a great way for students to understand AI. We are currently working on a set of digital fluencies that incorporate AI in education. But in the meantime, as I said, we have really talked to them about the ways that AI can help you in brainstorming versus the ways AI can help you in making corrections versus, all of your work is original and you're not using AI at all. So we have, what we've done is we've kind of defined that language for everyone, every teacher, every student. So whatever your kind of school culture is, right? Whatever it is that you as a school are saying, this is who we are, that's how you would build your AI student, I would say, education. And for us, it's agency. So we're going to give our kids a lot of time to play, a lot of time to explore. And then we're going to have conversations. What did that feel like? What did that look like? Whereas for other schools, you may, really talk about leadership, and that may be a different approach to have students doing their own research on AI and having students present AI and how they think it should be used, right? So it just really depends on what your school is trying to instill, because at the end of the day, if you really think about, we're going to always have new things come into education, and what keeps us grounded, of course, is the mission of our schools, but what also keeps us grounded is what's the skill that you're trying to teach. And for AI, if the skill that you're trying to teach is this idea of discernment around AI, then that's going to be your approach for how you introduce it and how you talk about it. If your skill level for AI is just exposure to it and education and understanding what it is, then that's going to be your kind of approach with students and the level of teaching that you would do with your students.
Yeah. I mean, one thing I'm struck by is that none of you are talking about. I don't get a picture at any of these three schools of a lot of energy going into policing AI and trying to play these games of having teachers stay one step ahead. It feels like you're all describing these transparent conversations with students, trying to bring them in and be very direct with them. And include them in these conversations. That's very, very different than running from this issue that seems like sort of a dirty secret in education right now. So anyway, just wanted to say I really, really respect that approach, and it seems to be working at all three of your schools.
Can I just jump in and add? I think there's a little both and also, I will say, at least at my school, of like trying to create this container for integrity and for AI use, right? And I think putting boundaries around and clarity around that allow people to experiment, right, and understand kind of what the boundaries are that we're describing. I love that Leah used the word discernment. Like, I think that is our approach of discernment about sort of ethical use and how to use this tool well and wisely. And I do think a piece of our work has been on looking at our integrity policy, but knowing also that this is not how we want to approach this by just responding to. We have to get out in front, I think, just like Danielle described, with clear expectations and rethinking our teaching, right, to really motivate learning. But then acknowledging too that what we added to our integrity policy, and I see Wilson Taylor, our Dean of Students, is on the Zoom, and he gets credit for this. We added into our integrity policy a space for how to respond when there's ambiguity, because I think one of the things that was really challenging is just it's harder to know. And so how do we try to uphold, again, another of our Quaker testimonies, integrity, well, when it's harder to know. So I'm just going to acknowledge that I think it's the both and of like coming out in front, creating that container, and then having to acknowledge sometimes you're in the position of responding, and that can be tricky, and it's gotten harder.
Yeah. In terms of our timing here, I would love to just give each of you just 1 minute. Any lesson learned that you haven't mentioned so far that you would like to share with people? That might be a tool, something you would do differently in the future. Can we do just 1 minute each, a quick lap through here? Anyone want to dive in?
Something I want to keep doing is focus groups with students. I just think it's really helpful to and meaningful to them as well to get to talk about their experience. So I think that those are helpful to our faculty. And the other thing I'm just really excited about are building, I guess, GPTs that are based on pedagogy that reflect our mission, and figuring out how to have it be something that faculty constantly use when they're crafting lessons, to get us back to, like, we really care about feedback. We really care about motivation, as I talked about. We care about the values in our mission. So I'm really excited about that possibility, and how that could spark new ideas in faculty and also mission alignment. So that's just something that we're working on right now.
Nice. Thanks a lot.
I would probably say, when you're trying to roll out something new, there's always roadblocks or challenges or things you couldn't have planned for. But I do think that the reason why the slow rollout is important is you also don't want to leave anyone behind. You don't want to leave a constituent behind. So you don't want to leave your parents behind, right? So you're ready, your school is ready, you've been having so many conversations, but you're like, oh, our parents are not in the research, they're not having these conversations. So we have lots of kind of conversations with our parents too, as well, to keep them in the loop, not just positions or statements. So I think making sure that when you're rolling out something new and when you're having conversations, and especially with something that's moving as fast as it is, I think everyone feels like AI is moving at the speed of lightning. We're going to get left behind. We're not going to be able to keep up. But I believe that we have, and this is solely my opinion, that we've kind of reached the peak of it's time for us to really embrace it in the sense of teaching our students. And I use this word discernment. It is time for us to teach our students about it, how to use it, how to be discerners of it. And I don't think that's going to go away anytime soon. So this idea of, don't leave a constituent behind, don't leave your teachers behind, don't leave your parents behind, don't leave your students behind, take the time to make sure every constituent in your organization is kind of has the education they need, has the why behind what we're doing. And then that will actually help the work move a lot faster than when you leave someone behind and now you're trying to go, backpedal and there's tension there. So I think that would be kind of a looking back, looking forward. And I think as a school, we've done a much better job of looking at every constituent and saying, what communication do they need? What education do they need? And that would just be my piece.
Thank you.
I've just so enjoyed learning through this panel. I think I've learned more than I've offered. It's been really interesting and exciting. I think one of the things for us in our sort of journey so far with AI has been really thinking about what has been helpful to adults. I think has been clarity, and so trying to build in kind of that container, like how do we give them enough safety to take risks and try something new, when I think a lot of times, and maybe especially at the high school level, but I'm sure in all schools, like learning and teaching and grading and all this feels really high stakes. And how do we make space for, for people to try something while we're kind of at pace, right? Doing our jobs and trying to onboard something new. I really appreciate this idea of grace, and how do we maybe in this container that we're trying to build, right? Really like ask for that in a different way. So I think it's for us, it's been, how do we think about helping everybody to feel safe in this new space, and to be able to lean in with curiosity and not be afraid of it. And we're still working at that out.
I'd love that we get to end on a little bit of humanity there. Feels appropriate. Enormous thanks to Laura, Leah, Danielle for sharing their wisdom with us today. Huge thanks. As we said before, we will share the recording and some resources with you. So thanks to everybody who signed up and who shared questions with us. You're driving this whole series by giving us your great questions. We'll share a newsletter. We've got some info about the next session coming up on January 20th. For those of you who are saying, this is great that we've gotten some really high-level questions, let's get more granular and let's talk about specific tools, specific use cases, what's exciting, where we need to be careful. Lauren Evans, Maya Bialik, and Tim Donahue are going to be joining us next time to share some of that more granular stuff. You've got the QR code and the bit.ly link there. And then for those of you who really are enjoying just talking with other educators from other schools, I facilitate a community of practice. If you're interested, once in a month, in having some really rich discussion about all of these issues, sharing wisdom with others, again, you've got the link in the QR code there. And then Mira, can you share a couple of other things?
Yeah, and mostly what I want to do is thank our panelists again, and thank you, Rob, for moderating these great questions from our community. On a slightly different note, but within this question of AI, we know that deepfakes are becoming a little bit all too common on our campuses. And so we've got two programs that might be of interest. One is Evan Harris of Pathos Consulting Group and I are going to be doing a webinar on deepfake safety for schools. That'll be in February. You can register. It will be free. And then after that, we're going to be putting together a 3-session virtual cohort, an online program, really looking deeply at how to lead, how to be a leader of safe schools in a deepfake era. So we'll send you those links along with all the other links and resources from today's session. Thank you, Rob. Thank you, Laura. Thank you, Danielle. Thank you, Leah. Thank you to everyone who came. Have a great afternoon.
Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you.